The chamber trembled with the echo of distant thunder, each rumble a reminder that the war outside was closing in. Dust sifted down from the cracked ceiling, settling across Kai's shoulders as if the ancient world itself sought to burden him with the weight of its choice. He stood at the edge of something that felt larger than life, a decision that carried the weight of entire civilizations. His chest rose and fell in slow, measured breaths as he tried to steady his thoughts, but in truth, nothing could prepare him for what had just been placed before him. Solana's words lingered in his mind like a haunting refrain. Until both sides truly desire peace. Until the treaty is honored not through force or fear, but through understanding. Forever. That was the price she had whispered. Kai looked at her. The alien who had once been nothing more than a statue, silent and eternal, until his reckless kiss had awakened her. Her eyes were alive now, shimmering with the depth of centuries, and in them he saw both hope and sorrow. She was asking him to do what her people had done before, surrender his freedom, his future, even the very rhythm of his own heartbeat, to become a seal that held peace together. It would mean vanishing from the world he knew. He thought of Earth, of the family who still waited for him back home. His mother, who would never know why her son had disappeared. His younger brother Thomas, who would probably rage against the injustice of it all. They would mourn him, list his name among the missing, and life would go on without him. But if Solana was right, if this ancient device truly worked as she claimed, then his absence would mean the survival of millions, human and alien alike. He clenched his fists. Return to the surface and fight? That path was meaningless. The war was spiraling out of control, a storm without end where every battle fed only into the next. The Federation could never win outright, not against an enemy just as desperate, just as wounded by centuries of mistrust. He had seen it in the soldiers' eyes, the exhaustion, the quiet despair, the knowledge that this was not a war to be won, only endured until extinction came. But here was a chance to end it. The choice was cruelly simple: live and watch everything burn, or sacrifice himself so that others could live. Kai closed his eyes, the image of his family burning bright in his thoughts, and whispered to himself, "Everyone will live." That has to be enough. When he opened them again, the weight of hesitation had lifted. He stepped forward, his voice firm despite the tremor in his chest. "What do I need to do?" Solana's expression softened with a relief she quickly tried to mask. It was not victory she felt, no. There was too much sorrow in her gaze for that. It was respect, even gratitude, mixed with the knowledge that he was about to give away everything. "Remove your outer garments," she said quietly. "The system needs direct contact with your skin." Kai blinked, caught off guard by the simplicity of her instruction. A sacrifice of this magnitude, and it began with something so mundane. Slowly, almost ritualistically, he unfastened his uniform jacket and let it fall. His shirt followed, leaving his chest bare against the cool, stale air of the chamber. When he hesitated at his boots, Solana's voice came again, softer but firmer. "Everything. The conversion must be complete." The request cut deeper than he expected. Stripping away his clothing felt symbolic, as if he were shedding not just fabric but the very identity of a soldier, a brother, a son. His uniform had always been his armor, the proof that he belonged to something greater. Now he was being asked to discard it, to surrender even that last tether to the life he'd known. Swallowing hard, Kai complied. The chamber's air wrapped around him, cool and unforgiving, raising goosebumps across his skin. For the first time in his life, he felt utterly exposed. Not just physically, but spiritually. He was standing naked before an alien civilization, before history itself, offering up his humanity as collateral for peace. Solana approached him then, her movements slow, almost reverent. She reached out, her slender hand pressing against his chest directly over his heart. Her touch startled him. It was warmer than he expected, almost hot, as though the life force within her flowed through her fingertips. "Once sealed," she whispered, her voice both a warning and a prayer. "You will not age. You will not move. You will not die. You will exist in a state between consciousness and sleep, aware, but detached. Time will lose all meaning." Her words should have terrified him. Instead, Kai found himself asking the only question that mattered. "But they'll live, right? Both sides? The war will stop?" Solana held his gaze. "If your intent is true, the signal will be sent. My people will recognize it as what it is, an offer of genuine peace. Kai inhaled deeply, letting the breath steady his trembling body. His decision was made. He nodded once. Then let's do it. The chamber darkened as Solana extended her hand toward the central altar. At her gesture, the carvings etched deep into the obsidian walls shimmered to life, glowing with a faint silver-blue radiance. Ancient energy stirred, a hum so low it resonated more in the bones than in the ears, as though the chamber itself were waking from centuries of slumber. Kai's pulse quickened. Each glowing rune seemed to tilt reality slightly, bending light and sound in ways that made the air heavy, alive. This was no mere ritual. It was machinery so advanced it masqueraded as mysticism, a fusion of science and faith built by a people who had once tried to do exactly what Kai was about to attempt. Step forward, Solana instructed. Her voice carried an unshakable calm, but Kai caught the tremor in her hands as she adjusted the crystalline spires rising from the altar. They reminded him of a crown, except instead of resting on a head, the structure was designed to enclose a human body entirely. A prison of light, not iron. Barefoot and stripped of everything that defined him, Kai moved closer. The floor beneath his feet pulsed faintly with warmth as though recognizing his presence. He shivered, gooseflesh prickling his arms. Lie down, Solana said, gesturing to the narrow platform between the spires. Kai hesitated only a heartbeat before obeying. The stone was cold against his back, grounding him in a way nothing else could. He stared up at the ceiling where the carvings twisted together to form the outline of two worlds encircled by chains. Humanity and alien kind, bound together by something far older than their hatred. Solana leaned over him, her long fingers brushing against his temple. A surge of energy jolted through his skin, sharp enough to make him flinch. It's aligning, she murmured. The system is reading your life force, mapping your essence. Once it begins, you cannot withdraw. Kai swallowed hard, forcing his voice steady. I already made my choice. For a moment, silence reigned between them. Then with a slow breath, Solana raised her hands. The spires around the altar flared to life, beams of light extending upward until they arced over Kai, forming a translucent cocoon. The hum deepened, resonating with his heartbeat, syncing with it. Pressure mounted in his chest, as if invisible hands were squeezing his lungs. He gasped, arching slightly off the stone. Breathe, Solana urged, placing her palm over his sternum. Let it take what it needs. He forced air into his lungs, each breath shallow but steady. With every exhale, threads of silver mist escaped his body, drawn into the glowing spires. His life essence, his very soul, was being siphoned, converted into something tangible the machine could weave into its eternal seal. Kai clenched his jaw, resisting the primal urge to fight it. Every instinct screamed at him to break free, to rip himself from the altar and run. But he stayed still, nails digging into the stone beneath him until his knuckles ached. The energy intensified, surrounding him in a storm of light. Memories flickered before his eyes like shattered fragments of glass. His first day as a cadet, the laughter of his brother, the gentle smile of his mother when she kissed his forehead. Each one felt as though it were being copied, taken from him, woven into the seal so the world would remember even as he faded. Tears stung his eyes. I'm not dying. I'm becoming something else. Solana's voice rose above the hum, chanting words in her ancient tongue. It wasn't just ritual. It was command, synchronizing the machine's response with her will. The glow of the spires shifted in rhythm to her words, pulsing faster, brighter, until the entire chamber was bathed in unearthly brilliance. Kai felt his body grow weightless, suspended between sleep and wakefulness. His heartbeat slowed, then stretched, each thump echoing across eternity. He wasn't sure if he was still breathing or if the machine was doing it for him now. Almost there, Solana whispered, though her own voice trembled. She pressed her hand to his forehead and he felt her presence seep into his thoughts, steady, guiding, reassuring. She was anchoring him, making sure his humanity wasn't lost completely in the transformation. He wanted to speak, to thank her, but his lips no longer obeyed him. His body wasn't his anymore. The cocoon sealed shut with a soundless burst of light. Kai's world narrowed to a single, overwhelming sensation. Silence. Not the silence of absence, but of eternity. Deep, resonant, unyielding. He was still there, still thinking, but no longer bound to flesh. His consciousness floated in a liminal state, tethered to the machine. Solana lowered her hands at last. Her shoulders sagged, and a sheen of sweat glistened along her brow. The ritual had succeeded. The seal was complete. She looked at him one final time, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Forgive us." And then the chamber fell still. At first, Kai thought he had gone blind. The chamber, the altar, even his own body dissolved into a void so absolute it swallowed light itself. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind. He tried to move, but there was no body to command, no muscles to obey. He existed only as thought suspended in a dark sea without up or down. Then came the heartbeat. Not his own, something vaster, deeper. A low, resonant thrum that seemed to pulse through the very fabric of reality. Each beat carried with it a ripple of color, threads of gold and silver weaving themselves across the void until patterns emerged. Constellations, rivers of light spirals that stretched into infinity. Kai realized he wasn't blind at all. He was seeing in a way no human eyes ever could, perceiving not matter but essence. The cocoon had stripped him of flesh, anchored his consciousness to something far beyond biology. He was no longer just Kai. He was becoming the seal. A voice drifted through the kaleidoscope of light. "Do not resist. You are aligning." It was Solana. Her words reached him not through sound but as impressions, flowing directly into the core of his being. She was still there, a faint presence tethered to his transformation, guiding him so he wouldn't shatter under the immensity of it. "What's happening to me?" His thoughts spilled outward, echoing across the void. "The seal accepts you. It reads your intent, your sacrifice. It is rewriting your essence so the signal will endure." Her explanation barely registered. What mattered was the sensation, pieces of himself unraveling and reforming. His memories were being catalogued, not stolen but etched into the lattice of the seal, immortalized. He saw them flashing in sequence, his brother's mischievous grin, the blue skies over the academy courtyard, the warmth of Earth's summer sun. Each fragment fused into the shimmering web, becoming part of something eternal. But along with the memories came pain. His individuality, his humanity was being stretched thin, diffused like ink in water. Would he still be Kai once this was done, or just a hollow echo of who he had been? The heartbeat quickened, resonating with his own soul. The void fractured into streams of energy that coiled around him, weaving tighter, binding him like chains of light. The sensation was suffocating. He tried to scream, but the seal absorbed even that, folding his anguish into its rhythm. "Stay calm," Solana's presence urged. "If you resist, the seal will reject you, and then all will be lost." Kai latched onto her voice, using it like a lifeline. He thought of his promise, whispered on the altar. "Everyone will live." That has to be enough. The words steadied him, anchoring him against the tide that threatened to erase him. And then slowly the pain shifted. The chains of light that had felt like restraints now pulsed in harmony with his own will. He was not being consumed, and he was being expanded. His consciousness stretched outward, touching things he had never dreamed possible. He felt the hum of the alien planet beneath him, the magnetic pull of its core, the faint resonance of its moons. He reached further still and brushed against the stars, distant but alive, their energy thrumming like ancient drums. For a moment, awe replaced fear. He wasn't just human anymore. He was something in between, a bridge, a living covenant. The cocoon cracked open with a blinding surge of light. To outside eyes, it would look as though the altar itself had birthed a radiant statue. Kai's body was there, encased in crystal, his form preserved as if carved by divine hands. His eyes were closed, his face serene, but within, his consciousness burned brighter than ever. Solana staggered back from the altar, shielding her eyes. The ritual was complete. She looked at the sealed figure, no longer merely a man, but the embodiment of sacrifice, and for the first time in centuries, she allowed herself to hope. The seal thrummed once, a resonant wave that spread far beyond the chamber. Across the battlefield above, soldiers on both sides faltered as an indescribable presence swept over them. Weapons lowered. The air shimmered with an unspoken truth. Peace was possible. Inside the crystal prison, Kai felt it too. The signal had been sent. Both sides would hear it, whether they wanted to or not. His sacrifice had meaning, yet even as relief washed through him, a cold realization followed. He was trapped. Immortal, aware, but never free, the transformation was complete. At first, time trickled past like a river. Kai could almost measure it in breaths, in the steady rhythm of the heartbeat that was no longer entirely his own. He drifted in a liminal state, aware yet detached, watching faint echoes of the world beyond his crystalline prison. He saw Solana kneel before the altar, her voice low with words of gratitude and sorrow. He felt the tremors of the battlefield above, the clash of armies halting as the seal's signal rippled outward. And then silence, the kind of silence that only comes when exhausted enemies realize they no longer have the will to keep killing. For a moment, hope swelled inside him. Maybe this sacrifice was worth it. Maybe this really was the end of endless war. But the moment stretched. Hours bled into days, then into something else. Days became indistinguishable from weeks, weeks from months. The chamber above shifted. New voices, new footsteps, different languages. Generations of soldiers came and went, each gazing upon the crystallized figure with awe or suspicion, never realizing that Kai still lived within. The longer he drifted, the more the weight of eternity pressed in on him. There was no sleep here, no escape. His mind never stopped, his awareness never dimmed. Every flicker of life around the seal, every tremor of the world itself echoed endlessly within him. He was tethered not just to the chamber, but to the very pulse of the planet. He felt the tides, the storms, the migrations of creatures across continents. Once he even sensed the fading cry of a dying species in the northern hemisphere, their extinction passing through him like a sigh. It was too much. Kai screamed into the void, but the seal swallowed his anguish. The crystal did not crack, the hum did not falter. To those outside he remained serene, his expression calm, his body preserved in perfect stasis. Only within did the torment writhe. I didn't know it would be like this, he thought, bitterness curling through his awareness. Solana, why didn't you tell me? But Solana was gone. He could no longer feel her presence. Whether she had died or her people had simply moved on, he didn't know. All he had was the unending silence of his own mind. Centuries slipped past. Civilizations rose and fell. The chamber around him was rebuilt, forgotten, rediscovered, worshipped, desecrated, and sanctified again. Priests called him a god. Scholars debated whether he had been man or myth. Children pressed their hands against the crystal and whispered wishes. Soldiers sharpened blades and swore oaths before him. Through it all, Kai remained, watching, enduring, waiting. The seal had fulfilled its purpose. The war he once knew ended long ago, and though new conflicts sometimes flared, none reached the scale of that ancient bloodshed. Peace, imperfect, fragile, but real, endured because he endured, and yet the cost gnawed at him. His brother, his mother, his entire lineage had turned to dust centuries ago. Earth itself had changed, its skies filled with fleets he could only glimpse faintly, its people advancing in ways he could barely comprehend. He wanted to reach out, to remind them of who he was, of the choice he had made, but the seal allowed no voice, no touch, no freedom. He was a guardian they could never thank, a sacrifice they could never truly understand. In moments of clarity, Kai told himself it was worth it. Millions lived because he remained bound. Countless children grew up under skies free of war because he bore the burden alone. But in the darker moments, when centuries felt like chains grinding into his soul, he wondered if he had been too rash, if perhaps he had doomed himself for nothing more than a fleeting dream of peace. Still, the seal did not waver, and so Kai endured the weight of eternity pressing down on him, until the concept of time itself unraveled into something meaningless. He was the seal, he was the promise, and he was utterly alone. For centuries, Kai endured the silence. Then slowly the silence began to shift. At first it was faint, vibrations along the chamber walls, strange pulses that did not belong to the natural rhythms of the planet. They came irregularly, mechanical and deliberate, like probing fingers pressing against the seal. Kai felt each one as a ripple across his awareness, subtle but unmistakable. Someone was testing him. He strained to perceive more, stretching his consciousness outward. Through the seal he could glimpse flickers of the outside world. Not the soldiers of old, not priests or pilgrims, but strangers clad in sleek armor, their faces hidden behind mirrored visors. Their voices were clipped, efficient, the language different from the one Kai had once spoken, but the intent was unmistakable. They had come for him. One of them pressed a device against the crystal, a humming core of red light. It sent a shockwave through the seal, one that Kai felt like a blade slicing across his mind. He recoiled instinctively, though there was nowhere to go. The seal held firm, but the probing continued, sharper, more insistent with each attempt. They don't understand, Kai thought desperately. They think I'm an artifact. They think I can be taken. But the seal was not a relic to be studied. It was alive because he was alive, and any attempt to tamper with it meant tampering with him. The intruders worked in silence, carving into the chamber walls, setting up strange machines that bristled with antennae and glowing conduits. Kai felt the vibrations spread deeper, their signals worming into the seal's lattice. Each pulse sent jolts of pain through his consciousness, fraying the edges of his awareness. For the first time in centuries, rage boiled within him. He had sacrificed everything for peace, endured endless solitude so others might live free. And now they desecrated it, treating his prison like a puzzle box to be solved. Leave me alone. He roared inwardly, and to his shock the seal responded. A flare of energy surged outward from the crystal, slamming into the intruders with invisible force. Equipment shattered, sparks arced through the chamber, and bodies were thrown against the walls. Kai felt their shock, their fear. One scrambled to his feet, shouting orders, while another dragged a wounded comrade toward the exit. But they didn't retreat. Instead, they regrouped, recalibrating their devices, adjusting their approach. Kai felt the prickle of scanners sweeping across the crystal, mapping every angle, every vibration as though they were dissecting him piece by piece. He wanted to fight back again, but the seal restrained him, its purpose not to destroy but to endure. He was its prisoner as much as its protector. More days passed, though to Kai they were only endless moments strung together. The intruders returned again and again, each time with stronger tools, more sophisticated machines. They were determined to breach the seal, or to harness it. And then one day, Kai felt something he had not in centuries. Resonance. Another presence brushed against the seal, tentative but unmistakably alive. Not like Solana's guiding touch, but sharper, curious, almost playful. A mind reaching for him. Kai froze. Could it be? Someone was trying to speak with him. The resonance grew stronger, threading through the seal until it brushed against his own consciousness. A voice followed, not in sound but in thought, faint and alien yet clear. You are not what they think you are. You are more. Show me, Kai reeled. Whoever this was, they were different from the intruders. This presence wasn't trying to break the seal, but to understand it. To understand him? Hope flickered, fragile, dangerous. If someone could hear him, maybe he wasn't alone after all. But hope quickly soured into dread, because if one voice could find him, others could too, and not all would come seeking understanding. Some would come with fire. The seal thrummed uneasily as though it too sensed the danger. Kai realized with a cold certainty that his solitude was ending. The world beyond had not forgotten him. It was awakening to him, and the threats it carried might undo everything he had sacrificed to preserve. At first, Kai thought he had imagined it. A trick of memory, or perhaps some long-buried fragment of Solana's presence echoing inside the seal. But no. The touch was too deliberate, too alive. Show me, the voice repeated, curious, insistent. Kai hesitated. He had been sealed for centuries, bound to silence. To reach outward now felt like violating some sacred rule, one he had never dared test. Yet the presence lingered, probing lightly like fingertips against glass. It was patient but unwilling to vanish. Who are you? Kai thought, unsure whether his words would cross the barrier. For a long heartbeat, nothing. Then faint but clear, a listener, a seeker, one who does not belong among the breakers. The breakers. Kai realized it must mean the intruders, the armored scavengers who treated the seal as an object. This presence was something else entirely, and that made him wary. Why are you here? The reply came like ripples in water, hesitant but truthful. Because your silence sings. I have walked among ruins and never heard them answer, but you answered back. The seal pulsed faintly around him as though acknowledging the bond. Kai tried to calm his racing thoughts. Whoever this was, they had pierced the barrier between him and the outside world in a way no one had since Solana. That was dangerous. That was also hope. You shouldn't be here, Kai warned. It's not safe. They will come back. They always do. The voice flickered with amusement. I have never been safe. That is why I listen instead of strike. They want what they do not understand, but I want to understand what they have already feared. Kai strained to sense more. There was a youthfulness in the tone, though not childish, more like a mind unburdened by centuries of war. Was it human? Scion? Or something entirely different born in the long years since he had entered the seal? He asked carefully, What do you see when you look at me? There was a pause then. A shape that is not stone. A song that is not silent. You are alive. Not artifact, not relic. Alive and bound. Something within Kai trembled. For so long he had feared being forgotten, reduced to legend or superstition. But this voice had pierced through to the truth. Yes, he admitted, a whisper of thought. I am alive. My name is Kai. The presence brightened with sudden energy as though savoring the syllables. Kai, you have endured, but why? Why surrender yourself to the quiet when the breakers roar above? The question cut deep. Kai remembered the war, the desperation, Solana's solemn voice. Until both sides truly desire peace. His sacrifice had been meant to hold the galaxy together, to give two civilizations a chance. Had it worked? Or had his silence simply become another forgotten layer of stone? Because I had to, he answered finally. Because war was consuming everything and someone had to stop it. This was the only way left. The voice went quiet for a long moment. Then sacrifice. I feel it in you. Not weakness, strength. The breakers do not know this word. They only take. Kai felt warmth spread through the seal, faint but real, as though the presence lent him back some piece of the humanity he had buried centuries ago. But with it came a sharp edge of fear. If this seeker could find him, others could too. And not all would approach with curiosity. Why tell me all this? Kai asked. The reply was steady. Because silence cannot hold forever. Cracks form, songs escape. And when they come, you will need more than silence to endure. The seal shivered around him, vibrating like struck crystal. Kai realized the truth. This bond wasn't just a fleeting accident. The seal itself had allowed it, perhaps even willed it. His isolation was ending, and with it the fragile peace he had purchased might unravel. The voice returned often after that first encounter. Never with the heavy invasive force of the breakers, but with the quiet persistence of a tide against stone. Sometimes it asked questions about his name, his sacrifice, the war he had ended. Sometimes it offered fragments of its own existence, though never fully clear. Kai pieced together hints. The seeker was young, neither human nor Kaian, born of a civilization that had risen in the centuries since his sealing. They were not conquerors, not scavengers, but wanderers of knowledge, tracing echoes of forgotten truths. It should have been comforting. And in some ways it was. To speak again, to be heard after ages of silence, filled a hollow place inside him. But with each conversation, Kai felt the seal strain. The boundary that kept him locked between sleep and waking began to tremble, like glass under pressure. One day, during one of these exchanges, the seeker's tone shifted. They know, the voice warned, hushed with urgency. The breakers have seen the resonance. They know you are not stone. Cold dread swept through Kai. The intruders had always suspected there was more to the seal than crystal and carvings. Now, with proof, they would not stop until they controlled it or destroyed it. Then leave me, Kai urged. If they find you linked to me, they will hunt you too. But the seeker's voice hardened. No, if you fall, the balance falls with you. Your silence has lasted long enough. Perhaps it is time the galaxy remembered the cost of forgetting. The seal groaned, a sound felt more than heard, as though acknowledging the truth. Cracks of light spread across its inner surface. Kai panicked, not because of freedom, but because of what freedom might unleash. Solana's words echoed through him, until both sides truly desire peace. If the seal failed before that moment, then his sacrifice meant nothing. Above, through faint vibrations, he sensed conflict brewing again. Armies massing, fleets maneuvering, treaties fraying into arguments. 10 centuries of peace and already the old patterns returned. He wanted to scream. Was it all for nothing? The seeker's voice steadied him. Not nothing. Your silence gave them time. But time is not enough. They must learn. They must see. See what? Kai asked bitterly. Another war? Another slaughter? No. A choice. The cracks widened, and with them came sensations Kai had not felt since his sealing. The rush of air, the tremor of footsteps, the hum of voices. The seal was weakening, bleeding fragments of the outside world into him. He felt the breakers again, their tools biting into the chamber, their greed palpable. But he also sensed others, scholars, diplomats, pilgrims. Some came with reverence, others with ambition, but all were drawn to the mystery of the living monument. The galaxy was watching. And Kai understood. The seal was no longer just his prison. It was a mirror, reflecting back the intent of those who approached. His sacrifice had bought time, but now the time for decision was ending. "What do I do?" he asked the seeker. The reply was soft, almost mournful. "Do what you did before. Choose not for yourself. For them." The seal shuddered violently. Cracks of radiant light burst outward, casting the chamber in blinding brilliance. The breakers stumbled back, their machines shorting out in arcs of energy. In that moment, Kai felt the galaxy's gaze converge upon him, countless lives waiting to see whether he would remain stone or awaken. He remembered Solana's kiss, her faith that sacrifice could seed peace. He remembered the laughter of children she had once felt through her petrified form. He remembered his brother's face, his mother's weary strength. And then he remembered why he had chosen this path at all. Not for glory. Not for recognition, for life, for the chance that others might inherit a galaxy not ruled by endless war. The seal's final layer cracked apart. Light consumed him. His voice, unused for centuries, rose within the silence. "If you would fight for the future, fight not with weapons, but with understanding. Let my silence be your proof. Let my awakening be your warning. Peace demands more than absence of war. It demands sacrifice." The chamber trembled as the seal's purpose fulfilled itself one last time, not to imprison, but to proclaim. Across worlds, across fleets, across peoples who had long forgotten his name, the message rippled outward. Kai did not know what came after. Whether the seal would dissolve into dust, whether he would awaken into flesh or vanish into legend forever. But as the light surged beyond him, he felt certainty in one truth. The choice was no longer his alone. The galaxy would decide. The story of Kai is not just about an alien statue, a forgotten war, or the cracks of destiny breaking open. It is a reflection of something deeply human, the struggle to choose between silence and action, destruction and understanding, selfishness and sacrifice. For 1,000 years, Kai gave up his freedom so that others might inherit peace, and when the seal finally broke, the galaxy was forced to confront its own reflection. Do we fight again or do we learn? That choice doesn't belong to Kai alone. It belongs to us. Every time we face conflict, in our lives, in our communities, or in the world when we stand before our own seal, we can treat others as breakers do, consuming without listening, or we can choose the harder path, patience, empathy, and sacrifice. History shows us that silence alone is never enough. True peace demands voices willing to rise with courage, even when the cost is great. If Kai's story spoke to you, don't let it end here. Share it, talk about it. Ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice so that others can live freer, safer, and more just lives? Subscribe, stay connected, and join this journey of stories that challenge us to think bigger than ourselves. Every like, every share, every comment is more than engagement. It's part of building a community that believes imagination can teach us how to live better in reality. The seal has cracked. The voice has spoken. Now it's your turn. Will you listen? Or will you let silence return?